Hi. In this episode of Growing Your Sense of Self Through Self-Defense, I'm going to give a little bit of an addendum to the introductory seminar. There was a couple points when I listened to it. Again, I hear a couple points that I would have liked to have made to make something clearer that I missed. First one is the unnatural or almost anti-natural way that we parent. We're going against our physiology and our natural wiring. Now, if you were to do, because that's so culturally ingrained to parent that way, that this is the proper way to parent, you get a lot of blowback by actually following your nature. Right? If you were a mother breast nurturing your child at 4 or 5 years old, which is what our nature intended, our culture would come down on you. Right? You might even get the cops called on what's going on. This mother's abusing her kid. So it does take courage to stand with your nature against cultural norms that are anti-nature. But who pays if you don't have that courage? Well, you and your child. So I recognize it's a difficult thing to do, and I understand because people did the cultural norms. There may be some sadness that they didn't follow through on their nature, but that is stuff in the past. All I'm saying is it would have been tougher to go with your nature and to go against the culture. So it's a way, it's one of the reasons we have the epidemic of low sense of self. The culture needs to change in these fundamental ways to align ourselves in not just in parenting, but that's a big part of it, but in our lifestyle habits, the stuff we do for eating and all this other, how much we're active or not. All that stuff is part of culture may fight against our nature. Now, second point I would have liked to stress on, when I talked about pain, and pain not as a sensation, first order sensation, but as a perception, an interpretation we place on it. I gave the example of the seedy character in a crowd pinching you in some private place. Because pain is a perception, it falls under the purview of the sense of self, which directs perceptions. So it can help mitigate the concept or the perception of pain or exaggerate. So a strong sense of self, a person with a strong sense of self, tends to be one that is not so concerned with pain. They recognize it as the ally, and it's something that to be concerned about because it may be reflecting of an injury, but not something to avoid doing because of fear of pain. Again, unrealistic, let's say, fear of pain. When I talked about control in the concept of the training that we will be doing, and talked about how it was of value in growing a sense of self because you are surrendering control of your own body to another to learn a technique. Now, that's sort of a temporal surrendering of control, not only just in that moment because you're waiting for the person, to put the technique on in such a way that you want to tap out, but they're learning the technique. And for you to think that they can get it right on the first try, some techniques perhaps, but generally no, there's some things you have to play with. And if you fight it or tap out too quick, they're not going to learn the technique. And that's part of the purpose of learning self-defense, is to get the technique correct so that they can be effective. Now, once the person can go into that technique pretty quickly and effectively, then we can deal with how might you counter that, or if you are reluctant to and they can't slip into it so quickly, what might they do to go to plan B with the technique that we're going to use? They could spin off of that to something else that could be effective for a person who's fighting the first technique they're applying. I did want to talk one more thing on the special bond that occurs when people train in this type of self-defense. I did talk about it when you're basically expressing a love and a respect for the other and an esteem because I'm willing to sacrifice for you. I'm going into pain for you. I'm surrendering control of my body to you. I'm trusting in you with my health. So when I do those kinds of things, I'm sending you a pretty core message about your value in my eyes. And then we swap roles, and you're doing the same thing to and for me. And when you have those types of relationships or interactions with an individual, the bonding that happens is something very special. When you train with somebody often enough, they are, there's a core melding that goes on to some extent, right? That there is a deep connection that's hard to replicate anywhere else. Well, I work with a guy or grew up in the same street or whatever, and sure, this is something much deeper than that. I mean, you might have had enough time with the person, shared enough of things, but this is the physical, this is the mental, emotional, and spiritual sharing, nurturing affirmations. And when you do that with somebody, and you do that repeatedly with somebody, it's special. And that's why I think doing it with one's spouse, with one's children, with one's parents, there's great value in that, because those are relationships you really, really would like to be special for you. So if for whatever reason that's not really practical, and there's a lot of reasons why it might not be, okay, there's other people you can find and have that special bond with, and it stays. I mean, people I've trained with a long time ago, there's still something special about them for me, and I suspect vice versa too. So those were the points I wanted to make that I missed making or didn't emphasize sufficiently, I don't think, in the initial seminar that I presented to Growing Your Sense of Self Through Self-Defense. So I'll see you again next time. Kamsahamnida. Thank you very much for being here. Toodles.